Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm so happy that you're here. And today we're going to be discussing all of the books I read in the month of October. This month I was dealing with like a pretty bad reading slump. And it wasn't that I wasn't like enjoying the books I was reading, I just wasn't getting sucked into them and like feeling as like pumped about them as I normally do. So this month I actually have two books that I did not finish, and not because one of them wasn't because I wasn't enjoying it, just wasn't in the right mood for it, and the other one was because I just didn't like it, so I didn't finish it. There was a 4-day period where I would like read a book a day, like I was on fire. And then like I don't know if you get like that where like you're in a slump but then you get out of it and you like devour books and then you get back into a slump? No? Is it just me? Cool. So that's what happened to me this month. My like reading speed was all over the place. There were days where I would finish a book in like a day or less, and then days where like it took me over a week to read a book that normally would only take me a couple of days. So this month felt chaotic. I still read 3 books that I ended up giving 5 stars. So it was a pretty good month overall. So the first book I read was The Bridge Kingdom, which I read off of Kindle Unlimited, so I don't have a hard copy. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was such a fun premise, and the world building like really sucked me in like right away. Like the second I found out what it was about, I was like, I need to read this book. And I didn't think that I would enjoy it quite as much as I did. I ended up giving it 4 stars because I did really enjoy it, but I didn't like the ending, and the ending stressed me out so much that I don't want to read the second. Like I don't see how there could be a happy ending for the couple after the first book. And when that happens, I just feel stressed out, and I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna read it. I probably will at some point, but it's just not on my foreseeable TBR. The second book I read was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is the first time I've read this book. I have had it for a while and I just have never really picked it up and read it, but I finally did this month. It's a thick book. It doesn't look like it would be that thick, but like the text is so small and it is like 550 something pages. It was a thick book. It at times was hard to get through, but overall the story, the writing, the characters were all just so interesting and so well written that I had to give this book a 5 stars. I have been thinking about it since I read it, and that's how I know that it's a 5-star read. It was just so much fun. It was so dark and confusing that I'm still not even sure how I feel about certain things that happened in the book. Like in the moment, I was like, that's justified. And then I stepped back and I was like, wait a second. No, it's not. It's murder. It's not justified. If you want a dark academia, morally gray, psychologically twisting book, this is the book for you. It really will suck you in, and I was like, I need to learn classical Greek ASAP after I read this. I was like, where's my tweed blazer? I need some little lace-up Oxford shoes, and I need to be speaking Greek. So if you're a fan of like ancient Greek mythology, if you're a fan of academia, I think that you will really like this book. Don't expect to breeze through it. You need to take your time with this book and kind of go slowly because there is a lot that happens. And Donna Tartt's writing is really good in that you need to take time to appreciate it. So I wouldn't like stress about like needing to get this done quickly. I would take your time with it. I gave it 5 stars. I know other people have said that they liked If We Were Villains more, but I actually, the only time I've tried to read that, I did not finish it. So I don't know. Maybe I need to go back and reread it. I've heard that the plot lines are very similar, but supposedly if you like one, then you won't like the other, or if you like one, you'll love the other. I don't know. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. The next book I read was The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, which is the first book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Nyaxia? That sounds wrong, but I don't know how else to pronounce it, so we're gonna call it that. I really enjoy really anything written by Carissa Broadbent. I especially love her male main characters. They're always like just a little grumpy, and I appreciate it. And when I'm reading the books, I really enjoy it, but I don't find myself thinking about them much after I finish them. And I never really find myself like craving to read the next book in her series. I did read the first book of the Daughter of No Worlds series, and then obviously I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night this month, and both of those books like are on Kindle Unlimited. Like you can go straight into the next book of the series, and I am planning to, but for some reason like that wasn't the first thing I did. And especially with The Serpent and the Wings of Night, there's a pretty big like plot twist at the end, so I don't know why I didn't immediately go into the second book. So for that reason, I ended up giving it a 4 stars. I thought that the plot line was really well thought out, the world was very unique, the premise was fun, and the characters were all moderately likable. Like there wasn't a single character that like just annoyed me. So it was very well written, but I didn't think about it a lot after I finished it, so for that reason I gave it a 4 stars. The next book I read was The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. This is really cool because she's from Alabama and I live in Alabama currently, so it was like kind of supporting like a local author, and I really love this book. It was everything I wanted it to be when I picked it up. It was kind of like, it reminded me a lot of Practical Magic, which I absolutely love that movie. It was just such a cozy book, and I ended up giving it 5 stars, which now that I'm looking back on my ratings, I'm starting to wonder if I'm a little chaotic when I rate them. But for what I wanted this to be, it was. So if I'm going to rate it as a rom-com, it's a 5-star rom-com to me. I loved it. And you know what? I'm not gonna defend myself. This was a 5-star read. I'm sure you've read it, but if you haven't and you want like a cozy Halloween witchy rom-com, this is it. There's nothing else you couldn't want. It's like a cute little town, fall festivals, witches, little conundrums and hoodwinks. You gotta love it. Okay, the next book I also read in a day, is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is the first book by Ali Hazelwood I've ever read. I don't know if this was the right one to start with, but I still really enjoyed it either way. I think this is her first published book. And y'all, I don't know if you knew this, but this is a Kylo Ren fan fiction. I remember reading it and just kind of being confused because like she kept describing Adam Driver on every single page, and then his name is Adam, and I was like, is this intentional? Like, is this an Adam Driver fanfic? And then I looked it up and I realized, no, it's a Kylo Ren fanfic, which once you know that, you can start to have more fun with it, I think. Like, if I didn't know that, I probably would have rated it a little bit lower because there were parts where I was like, that's just silly. But then afterwards, I realized, oh, well, it started out as a fan fiction and it reads like a fan fiction, which is why it kind of started to make sense to me. And I really liked it. I thought it was kind of fun. There were parts that I didn't enjoy. I thought they were a little awkward, but that's to be said about really any book in general, especially rom-com. There are going to be parts where you're kind of like, so I'm not judging it super harshly. I did give it a 4 stars because, again, I read it in a day. It is Kylo Ren fan fiction, but you know what? If you lean into it, it's just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed her writing, and I think I'm going to give some of her other books a shot after reading this. So 4 stars. The next book I read is another Kindle Unlimited book. This was The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. Now everyone and their mother has like gone crazy about this book, and I liked it. I did like it, but I think it was overhyped for me because the ending just kind of felt messy and like it didn't really make sense. And honestly, it felt a little predictable, but that's how I feel for most thrillers, that like I overhype it in my head and then I get to the ending and like I'm not as surprised as I wanted to be. But I did read it in one day. I thought that as far as like it being a fun read, it definitely checked out. So if you're looking for like a fun book that will like suck you in, this is definitely a good one for you. I don't think I'm going to read the continuation of the series, but I still really liked it, so I did rate it a 3 stars, which is still a good rating. I just don't think it was for me. Then the next book I read was Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion. Again, another book I read in a day. I have never read Joan Didion before. I've heard her highly recommended, so this was the first book of hers that I've ever read. And it's about a woman in the 1960s who is an actress in Hollywood, and she's married to like I guess like a producer or a director, like who's very famous, and she's not as famous, and like they like have like this tumultuous relationship, and it was all kind of confusing. It didn't make sense until the end, but this was a very fast read to me. Like it's not a very long book. It's only like 200 pages, and like the margins are huge, so like you can read this pretty quickly. I will say that I've like swung from confused to sad pretty much nonstop. Like this book kind of bummed me out, and it's supposed to. It's about a very sad topic. I don't want to get into it because I don't want to spoil it, but it was sad. Like it just like hurt my heart at times. The setting was like just such a cool backdrop for the story to take place. Obviously 1960s Hollywood, the desert, like it was just really a great setting for it. I thought it was a really great example of what it means to be a woman in a man-dominated world. So I would definitely recommend this book if you're interested on topics like that. Really was just like a very powerful and moving book for it only being 200 pages. I did rate it 4 stars because there were parts of it I didn't like, and I spent a lot of the book confused until the last chapter. But looking back on it, I'd probably rate it closer to like a 4.5. Okay, and then the next book I read was Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I don't think I have a very popular opinion on this book. For a debut novel, this was very impressive. For a novel in general, I thought this was a little boring. Please don't kill me. Let me talk about the things that I didn't like. Okay. First off, I thought the plot was a little boring. The premise of it was interesting. Like, you live in a world where everyone has powers, and if you don't have powers, like, you're hunted, right? And this girl, like the main character, she doesn't have powers, but she was raised by her father to pretend that she has like a psychic ability. So it felt like the TV show Psych, which is a great TV show. I hold nothing against her for taking that, and it's not like a unique concept. It just reminded me of that at times. And then the plot itself just reminded me of The Hunger Games. And some people loved that. They liked that it was kind of predictable, but to me it was a little boring because I've already read The Hunger Games and I liked it then, but like I wanted something different here. And so for that reason, I wasn't a huge fan. And I also thought that the pacing was a little off. Like there would be chapters dedicated just to dialogue between the main character and the love interest, and then like a whole part of the trial was summed up in like 2 sentences, and like all the action kind of took place like just as a side note. And so for that reason, like it was a little boring. but I do think that for a debut novel, it was a very well written book. I enjoyed the main character. Sometimes I find them annoying, but I actually really liked her. She didn't do things that annoyed me. She didn't make stupid decisions that annoyed me. And I liked the love interest. Again, I thought the banter was a little boring at times because it really was just like pages and pages of banter at a time. But I still liked their relationship, and it left on a good cliffhanger. Not a cliffhanger that stressed me out like the Bridge Kingdom, but a cliffhanger I could see them coming back from. So I will probably end up reading the second book of this series whenever it comes out. But for me, it wasn't a 5-star read. There were times where I was bored. But overall, I gave this a 3-star because, again, I liked the overall premise. I just think that it could have been maybe edited a little bit better. That's another thing. I think I have the UK version because like the back of it is in pounds. There were so many typos in this book. Like very obvious typos that I was like, how did they not catch this? So that's like that's a point against the publisher, not the author. But I ended up giving this 3 stars. If you want to read it, definitely go for it. I don't not recommend it. I just don't recommend it. That makes sense? I feel like I'm being harsh. It was good, just not great. Then the last book I read in the month of October was None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Just to get to the end of it, I gave this a 5-star. This was such a good book. I read this in a day. I like binged it. I came out of it like, what is reality? What is true? What is real? Nothing made sense to me. I loved it. And like the ending, like the epilogue makes you question everything. Like, was what happened what really happened? We don't know. And I think the title kind of like hints at it, that like you can't really trust anything that anyone says in this book. And I thought about this for about 24 hours after I finished the book, just like, what happened? I loved it, and it took place in London, and that was kind of a fun setting. It's about a podcaster who ends up interviewing someone who ends up stalking her, and then she learns all these things about her, but like, wait, is that true? We don't really know. And it was so good. 5-star. If you haven't read this, you should. All right, and then the 2 books that I did not finish is, first off, A Halloween Party, or A Haunting in Venice, which is the name of the movie that was made after this. I am about halfway through. I'm on page 128 of 290 or something like that. So like close to being halfway through. And mainly I'm not enjoying it. I can't believe that the first Agatha Christie book I've ever picked up, I'm not going to finish. That feels wrong. But I just wasn't loving it. I'm not going to force myself to finish a book that I'm not enjoying, especially when it's just for fun. Something that kind of irked me about this book, though, was it felt like every single page was a tirade against people with mental illness, and how people with mental illnesses are going to commit crimes and they deserve to be locked up in asylums, and like people are too lenient on people with mental illness and they all need to be locked up in asylums. That is basically like almost verbatim what multiple of her characters say in this book. And they're all different characters in different conversations, and they all say the same exact thing about people with mental illness. And I thought that was icky. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm just being sensitive. If you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear it. If you think that I should continue to read this book, let me know. I've kept my place in it, so if I feel inspired to come back to it, I can. I was just overall kind of disappointed by this one. The last book that I did not finish, let me preface this by saying it's not because this book was not good. I just was not in the right mood for a thriller at the time, and then I waited too long and I forgot what was going on, and so I plan on reading it in the future. I just didn't finish it this month, and that is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I was reading this like in the middle of a book slump, and I kind of just picked it up hoping it would like shake me out of it, and it didn't. But the part that I did read, I really enjoyed. So it's not like this wasn't a good book, it's not like I didn't enjoy it, I just wasn't in the right mood for it. And as a mood reader, like if you're not in the right mood, it's impossible to read a book. And I didn't want to force myself to do it. So I do plan on coming back to this. For what I read, it was very interesting. If you're looking for like a haunted, gothic, suspenseful thriller, this is probably going to be a really good book. I've heard good things about it. I've seen good reviews. Definitely not bashing this book. I just didn't finish it. So in total, I read 9 books this month. Only 6 are here because 3 of them were on the Kindle. Overall, it was a good month. There were 3 5-star ratings, so that's pretty impressive. And then some books I just didn't like very much. Obviously 2 that I didn't finish, a couple that I rated not low, but not high. They were okay. If I had to pick a book that like I just absolutely loved, it was the best book that I read this month, it would have to be None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I could talk about this for so long, but I don't want to say anything and give away any of the plot twists because that was part of what made it just so interesting, and it really did just like tie together so well. I loved this book. And if I had to pick a book that I didn't love so much that I actually finished, I would probably have to pick maybe The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I just think compared to like what Lisa Jewell did in None of This Is True, like that makes The Housemaid just seem like that much more underwhelming to me. But you know, teach their own. If you liked The Housemaid, good, I'm glad. Read what you enjoyed. So that is all that I read for the month of October. If you have any opinions on the books I read that differ from mine, or if you agree, please let me know. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!